the only continuous member of his 70s supergroup. He's famous for his flamboyant style and hair, and he's still rocking well into his 70s. The group are Slade, and this week, these are the choices of Dave Hill. Dave, welcome to Boom Radio.
Hi, Phil. It's a pleasure. I haven't spoken to you before.
No, it's fantastic. It's great. We've had Don on, we had Jim on, and it's great to have you on. So that's 3 out of 4. Okay. Only Noddy to go. Right. I'll have to try and crack him next year. Yeah. Anyway, look, it's fantastic that you're on. You've got 2 gigs coming up in, I think it's Hastings and Margate. Tell us about those gigs.
Well, I haven't played those for quite some time. Margate is quite famous in the sense the gig's called the Dreamland. It was always a tour place years ago for most up-and-coming bands. Most people that made it would have played Margate.
Well, we wish you the best of luck with those, Dave. As a reminder, it's Hastings on Friday the 28th of November and Margate Dreamland, as you mentioned, on Saturday the 29th of November. Dave, tell us about the Black Country. What are your memories of growing up in the Black Country in the 50s?
Well, generally speaking, I found people nice. The war was over, so Britain was recovering from the war, and I was one in 1946. So in 1946, Britain was on its knees, and the amount of construction and repairs, and most people were on rations. We didn't have any chocolate or oranges or anything like that. And Christmases were fairly simple. Living on a council estate was it was the government's dream to give council the rights to build these estates for the working man. Because before that, the working man had to have a toilet outside and probably had a metal tin to have a wash in, right? You know, going back to the war years.
Yeah. A
council house means you've got a bath. You've got a kitchen, you've got a coal hole, because you were using coal in those days. Dad was a mechanic, a very good mechanic, and he was working at a local garage. Mom was the most interesting of all of us, and we didn't know the full story about it. We knew she was clever, and she always held a strong job. But after she died, we found out that Enoch Powell mentioned she was a very important woman. And then we found out why. Well, because she was sworn to secrecy, she couldn't tell us. She was actually a War Cabinet Minister's secretary. So she was involved in London in the war. And the odd scrape I got in, with a bit of tomfoolery, she was on the case and dealt with it. But it was nothing important anyway. It's not worth talking about. But the Black Country at that time, before I got my first job, was very factory. There's a lot to do with Slade's music, right? And groups like Black Sabbath, right, for instance, a certain gutsy kind of sound. And you've got the Roy Woods, you've got the Jeff Lynnes. But going to work, and it was Bilston, where I work near there, is that you go past the factories and you'd have muck on your teeth. You were riding a bike, you know, because the density of the Black Country it's a lot to do with the factories. And I think the music of our band and the kind of singer we got, someone said to me, I think it was my wife's dad, he said, Noddy's got the sound of a voice of a working man. Someone like Bruce Springsteen who wants to get out of this life and make something of himself. And Bruce Springsteen said that the Animal song, Gotta Get Out of This Place, influenced him to write a lot of the songs that he wrote. And he was always on about getting out, or, you know, America and all that sort of stuff. And he was I think he was a big fan of Slade as well, because he turned up 5 times at our concerts in the States. Yeah. Well, I've not met him personally, but I'm aware he was there.
the music come from for you? Was it at home or school?
I was always quiet at school. And when I left school, I had a job working at tarmac. But I was learning to play guitar, which is my saviour, to be honest with you. And my dad bought me a cheap guitar from Case Catalogue, £7.50. He said, I'm not buying an expensive guitar because you'll probably not do it. And he wasn't right about that. I did do it. And by the time I was 18, I was really good at it, right? I'd learned the Shadows, I got into the Beatles, and I ended up being in a band which would lead to the band that became Slade.
Dave, let's pause for some music, and I asked you to pick one of your favourites, and this is, it's about the songwriter, this, isn't it, rather than the performer?
I was watching the life story of Jerome Kern, and I knew he wrote Showboat and all that, you know, Old Man River. And I didn't know he wrote Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. It's one of my favourite songs. I'd heard the Platters sing it when I was about 10. And I've always loved it. I never knew he wrote it. I may have bought a record from my half-sister, but it wouldn't be a record I'd buy, but I remember buying that.
Dave, the evolution of your style as a group really did play a big part, didn't it, in you becoming famous? Tell us about how that all happened.
When we became Skinheads, because our manager, Chaz Chandler, was talking to our publisher, Keith Hawthorne, who handles the Stones and us and various, Chaz was saying, I'm trying to get this band successful. He said, what's going on in the scene? It's hard to break them, and they're a great band. And Keith said, well, there's a movement called Skinheads, and they haven't got a group. He said, that might be an angle. He said, the only downside is they'll have to chop their hair off, right? Which was very unpleasant. And, but we didn't want to disagree because Chaz was our manager, and he was very excited about it. I'm not going to stretch out the story behind exactly what happened, but the one good thing that came from it did get the name known, maybe not all in the right ways. The skinhead movement would not like our music because we weren't playing ska and things like that. And also, being a fashionable person myself, a pair of jeans and bobber boots is not exactly my idea of being a pop star, right? But we did it, but eventually it died down. It only lasted less than a year. We started to grow hair, and from that point, I developed an hairstyle from growing my hair back. So I had long hair at the sides of my head, and the fringe was very short, right? It was like a short page boy fringe. That came from the growing of the hair. Nod grew sideboards, wore a flat working man's cap, right? All the rest of the band grew the hair. And not long after that, we were scratching our heads of what to release. And Chaz said, you do a Little Richard number called Get Down and Get With It. He said, it always goes down great at gigs. Why don't we record that and make it sound live, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a big boot stamping, clapping song, you know. Little Richard did it. He didn't write it, but he did it. Nod was a massive Little Richard fan because he loved his voice. So we went in the studio, we put it down, and we gave it the emphasis that it sounded like it was recorded as a gig, you know? But it actually worked. And then we got it to Radio 1, and it started to pick up airplay, and then it headed up the charts eventually, which then got us known, or in a sense, got us on top of the pops.
Get Down and Get With It, Slade. And Dave, of course, from that, it just, well, it went crazy, didn't it? Mad.
As mad as you can get it, I suppose, because this is mad like, I mean, if you look at the Beatles when they made Our Day's Night and they're running around and going in between things, I mean, in a way, when I used to watch that, I said, oh, it must be great to have a following like that racing after you down the streets, you know. But actually, when you get it, it's not always that easy, right? No. Because we couldn't go anywhere. When we reached 1973, I mean, it was almost to the point that you do reach a point, like the Beatles, where they end up in bedrooms, right? And they're protected, right? Because there was always chaos around hotels. We did a gig in London called Earl's Court, right? And it was a massive gig, and Bowie had done it 2 weeks before, but he hadn't sold it out. When we did it, it was totally sold out. And British Rail and the underground trains put on extra trains to bring the fans from outside of London into Earl's Court, right? But they were all dressed up in top hats, glittering in their hair, and the seats and everywhere have got glitter all over the place, right? So it glittered in the taxis. All this was going on. We didn't know it was going on, but we were aware something was going on, because you were talking about a pinnacle moment in when you can't get bigger. It's almost, you get to the top of Mount Everest and you're not going to get higher.
Baby, baby, baby.
Slade is our guest on Choices. And coming next, how Ozzy Osbourne gave them a second career break.
What?
Dave, in the end, why do you think the group were so successful?
The musicianship in Slade is pretty phenomenal when you work out who does what. And then when you've got a vocalist with the strength I mean, he's probably the most powerful vocalist I've heard since Little Richard. I mean, you've had Robert Plant and people like that, and you've had Free, you know, Paul Rodgers, and they're all great vocalists, but not had this kind of very powerful way of expressing. And it wasn't just the rock songs, it was also the ballads we did, you know, Every Day, My Oh My, and great songs like Far, Far Away, which was written in the Mississippi. He was looking out the window and seeing the Mississippi River going past, and he thought, yellow lights. And he was looking at it, he was going, I've just seen the yellow lights of the Mississippi. And that was the first line. He went to Chaz, he said, I've got this idea. He said, I was just watching the Mississippi River, and he suddenly spawned this idea, and Chaz said, go to your bedroom and write that song. So he got together with Jim Lee, and that's a remarkable song. That it's a massive song in Russia and Baltic states and all that. Really massive song, that is.
Slade, Far, Far Away, and Dave Hill from Slade is our guest on Choices this week. Dave, obviously the hits dried up towards the end of the 70s, but you did have a big break at that point, didn't you? Courtesy of Ozzy Osbourne. It's a great story. Tell us that.
When Slade's records weren't selling during the late part of the 70s, like all bands, it dries up, you know. We were in a tricky situation around about 1980, and something happened which changed the course of the career. We kind of felt we tried other ways of releasing records, and nothing was really happening. Because once you lose airplay with Radio 1 or whatever, they move on to a newer act, and that's normal.
Yeah.
And what happened with us was that we get a phone call from a guy running the Reading Festival. And bearing in mind, Reading Festival was bigger than Glastonbury. So, and there's 40,000 people there, and they're there to see Ozzy Osbourne, right? But it turns out Ozzy, 2 days before, pulled it. He said his band wasn't ready. So, in a way, it was a thank you to Ozzy, as I know him. And Chaz comes on the phone and says, one hell of an opportunity. He said, you know, put yourselves in a big stage, you know, in a big event, not just playing clubs like we were. He said, there are 40,000 people there. Ozzy can't do it. And we went down an absolute storm. We come off that stage. Within 2 months, we were in the charts, right? And then it went on to My Oh My, Run Run Away, Lock Up Your... Went to a load more hits.
Phil from Slade, our guest on Choices this week. Dave, you mentioned Free and Paul Rodgers earlier, and I know that they're one of your favourite groups with one of your favourite tracks. Why?
Well, Rodgers for a start, Paul Rodgers' voice. But the guitarist particularly, it was Paul Kossoff, wasn't it? Yeah. Kossoff had a way of playing, and he had a great vibrato in his, like as if his strings were thick on there, and he held the notes. But All Right Now was a good song, sung by a great singer, and it was also leading to us happening, because we cited them as a band you wanted to listen to. And I think it was just a combination that when that record come on, it was purely for that every bit of it worked, including the solo. Just a favourite.
Dave Hill from Slade's favourite songs. Dave, it's almost December. How important is this time of year to you?
Christmas is a particular moment when they go, oh, it's Slade, and it's not Christmas without that song. Now, we didn't write that song to have that effect. The song was written as purely a good idea for a release at the end of 1973. So it was purely a good idea. And thanks to John Lennon, which you don't know this story, but I'll tell it, John Lennon was in the studio in New York. It was 100 degrees, and we went over there with Chaz, and we were doing some promotion and meeting the record company. And Chaz said, we've got a week off. He said, why don't we put that Christmas song? He said, I haven't heard it yet. He said, so I haven't heard you sing it. No, well, they hadn't heard it. And neither had I either. So he says, John Lennon's in the studio. I'll give him a call. Well, they're friends, you see. So he rang him, and John said, yeah, I'm doing what I want to do to what he's doing. He says, why don't you have the week? And he said, I'll give you the week. So we went in and learnt the song in the studio, right, and built it up, right? John Lennon came in to see Chaz, and he was playing the Christmas song to him, right? And John's listening, and he says, I like him. He's talking about Nod now. I like him. He sounds like me. And I thought that was so true, is that the young John Lennon is a Noddy in a way, you know, very similar power, you know. Yeah. And I thought it was a nice compliment. The funny side of recording that song in New York was the studio was in a huge office block, right? And we had to go in before they came to work because we wanted to sing the choruses. So here it is. Yeah. So it took some time to put the mic up and get the three of us round the microphone to give it a lot, sound like people singing it. And the Americans came in, right? And they're outside and it was boiling up, right? And they come in and they're not slowing coming forward. It was always like, my God, what's going on here? You know, we're looking around there. What the hell? Who are you singing about Christmas? He said, do you realize how hot it is out there? He said, it's July, man. He said, and we said, well, he said, who are you? I said, we're Slade. Never heard of you. But it must have sounded really funny for us to be standing around the microphone. Yeah. It wasn't like we were in England standing around the microphone. Everybody would know us. But then they thought we were a bunch of, mad dogs and Englishmen out in the midday sun. Yeah, like some crazy people from England singing about Christmas and they're boiling hot. I just thought it was so funny. But the impact or the actual effect of that song, we could never have measured at all what that song would do.
Dave Hill, great to talk to you. Thank you.
Okay.